They body-shamed the wrong woman. Cameras caught the guards laughing as they threw her out, drenched, humiliated, in front of the city's elite. But by midnight, everything changed. The sponsors, gone. The investors, vanished. The entire gala, erased from the internet like it never existed. No one understood how one girl could make an empire disappear overnight. Until the truth leaked, her father wasn't just rich, he was power itself. And what he did next didn't just end their careers, it ended the entire event. Forever. If you're ready to hear the whole story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as crazy as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let's get into it. From miles away, the Imperial Orchid Hotel looked like a jewel dropped into the city's heart, all glass, gold, and arrogance. Floodlights swept across its mirrored facade as limousines eased forward in a slow, regal queue. Every window reflected sequins and camera flashes. It was the night of the Orchid Foundation Gala, an event whispered about for months, where philanthropists came to flaunt generosity they didn't truly feel. Inside, laughter rang high and artificial. Outside, photographers barked names and traded gossip like currency. Fame and fortune mingled with perfume thick enough to choke the air. Then, a black sedan pulled to the curb. It wasn't one of the gleaming limos or sponsor-branded SUVs. Still, the crowd's instinct made them look. The back door opened, and Isabella Royce stepped out. She was 25, tall but soft-curved, the kind of woman whose beauty didn't scream but lingered. Her gown was pale lavender, elegant but modest, hand-stitched silk without a famous logo. A single white rose pinned to her shoulder carried more meaning than jewelry could. The murmurs began almost immediately. "She's not on the arrivals list." "Who invited her?" "Is that custom or thrift store chic?" The bodyguards at the velvet rope shifted. They were large men in black suits, faces blank with the confidence of those who borrow power from others. One of them, a younger guard with slicked hair, raised a hand to stop her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, polite enough to sound practiced. "This event's for guests and sponsors only." Isabella smiled faintly, calm. "I am a guest. Isabella Royce." He scrolled through a tablet, pretending to search. Royce. He looked up, smirking. "Don't see that name, sorry. The staff entrance is around the side." A few reporters nearby stifled laughter. Cameras clicked. Someone live-streamed it. The second guard leaned in, his tone lower, meaner. "Look, lady, this is a high-end function. Maybe the dress code threw you off." His gaze swept her figure like a weapon. "We don't do influencer cosplay here." The insult hovered, heavy and poisonous. Around them, the crowd's silence turned into whispers. Every cruel syllable was fuel. Isabella's jaw tightened, not with shame, but restraint. Her voice, when she spoke again, was measured steel. "Evelyn Marston sent my invitation personally." The guard laughed outright now. "Evelyn Marston? Sure. And I'm the Prime Minister. Step aside, please. You're blocking arrivals." A woman in a gold gown brushed past Isabella, perfume and contempt in her wake. "Let her through next time," she told the guard sweetly. "The entertainment's priceless." Laughter rippled again, soft, practiced, lethal. Isabella turned. Cameras caught the movement. A flash of lavender silk against black asphalt, the white rose gleaming like defiance. The flashes multiplied. She walked away slowly, posture perfect, face unreadable. Inside, a violin quartet swelled, muffled by the glass doors that had shut her out. At the curb, she waited for her driver, the cold wind lifting strands of her hair. The hotel's gold emblem glowed above her, Imperial Orchid, letters that now looked hollow. She exhaled, just once. There was no sob, no collapse, only silence. the silence of someone remembering every detail for later. Behind her, the guards resumed their post. One of them muttered, "She'll think twice before crashing this place again." The other laughed. "If she even gets another invite anywhere." Humiliation is a strange currency. Those who spend it cheaply never realize the debt they've created. A luxury car finally arrived. Isabella stepped in without looking back. The cameras followed her until the taillights vanished into the night. The city beyond the hotel was quieter, less adorned. Tower windows flickered like restless eyes. From her seat, Isabella watched the skyline pass, each building another tower of judgment. Inside the car, her phone buzzed. A notification. Lavender Gate trending. Someone had already clipped the video. Thousands of strangers were laughing in digital unison. She locked the phone and closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, she saw herself reflected in the window. One half in the neon glow of the city, the other swallowed by shadow. They will not remember my face, she thought, but they will remember what comes after it. Her driver glanced at her through the mirror, uncertain whether to speak. He didn't. The air in the car felt colder than the night outside. When they reached the Royce estate, hidden behind pines and stone walls, Isabella finally exhaled. She lingered on the driveway, watching the house lights come on one by one, as if the building itself had woken up and was listening. Inside waited a man who didn't attend galas, didn't speak on television, and hadn't been photographed in a decade. A man whose influence threaded quietly through half the city's wealth. Her father. The Royce estate sat on the edge of the city like an island of silence. No gates screamed wealth, no gold letters announced legacy. Just stone, glass, and the sound of wind brushing through cypress trees. It was the kind of place where privacy wasn't a request. It was a right, enforced by discretion and power. Inside, light spilled from tall windows, falling across marble floors and oil paintings whose signatures the world no longer remembered. A fire hummed in the grand hall, calm, steady, unbothered by time. Henry Royce stood by the hearth, sleeves rolled, hands clasped behind his back. His hair was silver, his posture military. There was something in his stillness, a weight, a precision, that made even silence seem deliberate. When Isabella entered, he didn't turn immediately. He knew her steps, light, careful, hesitant only when she carried something heavy. "You're late," he said, voice even. "The gala," she murmured. "It didn't go as planned." He turned then, eyes sharp beneath calm features. "So I've gathered," he said. "Sit." Isabella sat across from him, the firelight brushing her cheek. She wasn't crying. She never did. But the humiliation clung to her like invisible ash. Henry watched her for a moment, studying the small tremor in her hand as she adjusted her hair. "Tell me," he said simply. And she did. Every detail. The laughter, the bodyguards, the woman in gold, the flash of cameras that made cruelty look glamorous. Henry didn't interrupt once. He just listened, really listened. His expression unchanging, the kind of focus that feels like surveillance. When she finished, silence stretched between them. The fire cracked once, as if on cue. "They mocked your name," he said softly. "They didn't know it," she replied. "No," he said. "They didn't bother to know it." He moved to his desk, a relic of dark wood and hidden drawers, and picked up a remote. With a single click, a projection filled the wall. The same footage the internet was feeding on. Isabella turned away, ashamed, but he watched the clip without flinching. When it ended, he replayed it, then again. Each viewing stripped the scene of emotion until only structure remained. The guard's smirk, the crowd's rhythm, the moment the laughter crescendoed. "Do you see it?" he asked. "See what?" "Patterns," Henry said. "Predictable cruelty. It repeats itself because no one pays enough to stop it." He poured himself a glass of water, drank once, and set it down with clinical care. Do you know what I built my empire on, Isabella? Software, defense contracts, communications. No, he said. Silence. I built it on the ability to know when to stay quiet until the world leans in to listen. He looked back at the screen. They wanted to make you a joke, he said, but they've given us a stage. Isabella frowned. Father, it's just an event, a gala. I don't want you to… This isn't about revenge, he interrupted, voice cold enough to chill the room. It's about corrections. Every system requires balance, even arrogance. He walked toward the large map pinned to the wall. The city, divided into glowing sectors. The Imperial Orchid Hotel blinked in gold. Do you know who owns that hotel? Evelyn Marston, she said. The foundation chair. On paper, Henry said, but paper burns. He pressed a button. Names and corporations appeared on the map, overlapping, tangled webs of ownership. Half her funding runs through shell firms in Zurich and Hong Kong. She doesn't know that some of those firms belong to me. Isabella blinked, realization dawning. You own them? I own everything she borrowed against, he said quietly. The walls of her success are built from my shadow. He turned off the projection and finally looked at his daughter, the faintest glint of something dangerous in his gaze. Tomorrow you will say nothing, he said. No interviews, no posts, no defense. Let them believe you're broken. Let the story grow wild. Isabella hesitated. And then? And then, Henry said, we remind the world that some names are whispered because they're too heavy to shout. In the days that followed, the internet devoured the scandal. Clips of the bodyguards went viral. Influencers made reaction videos. Hashtags multiplied like locusts. Lavendergate, Gala shame, who is Isabella Royce? And through it all, Isabella said nothing. No interviews, no statements, no tears. Her silence became louder than outrage. People began to wonder who she was. Not because she wanted attention, but because she denied it. Meanwhile, somewhere in the boardrooms of glass towers, accounts began freezing. Calls went unanswered. Marston's foundation found its partnerships temporarily suspended pending audit. The hotel's primary investor group received withdrawal notices that read like polite death sentences. It all happened quietly, efficiently. Henry Royce didn't shout. He simply removed gravity from under their feet. 3 nights later, Evelyn Marston's phone rang. It was midnight. Henry? She answered, voice trembling. Evelyn, he said calmly. I saw what happened at your event. It was an unfortunate misunderstanding. You'll correct it, he interrupted. Publicly. Henry, please, you can't. You'll apologize, he continued, tone unshakable. On television. You'll do it because I own the cameras you'll speak into. The line went silent. Evelyn realized then what the world would soon learn. That Henry Royce wasn't just a billionaire. He was infrastructure. And Evelyn, he added, voice dropping lower. Tell your guards they won't be hard to find. I own the company that trained them. He ended the call. Back in her room, Isabella sat by the window, unaware of the phone call's details but sensing the shift in the air. Her reflection hovered against the night, calm, unreadable. Somewhere far away, the storm her father had unleashed was already beginning to ripple through headlines and boardrooms alike. Humiliation, the narrator's voice whispered, is a spark. In the wrong hands, it burns reputations, but in the hands of power, it burns empires. Morning light crept across the city like judgment. By sunrise, the Imperial Orchid Hotel was no longer a landmark of luxury. It was a crime scene of public opinion. News vans clogged the street. Reporters shouted into cameras, their voices crisp with scandal. Drones hovered above the gold-trimmed awnings that had once promised exclusivity. Who is Isabella Royce? Flashed across every major network. Beneath it, looping footage of her humiliation played endlessly, slowed, zoomed, dissected. Each frame became evidence in the court of global empathy. Twitter, TikTok, and breakfast shows all sang the same tune. Outrage. Fashion commentators debated her dress. Feminist panels condemned the body shaming. Conspiracy theorists whispered that the guards were planted. But no one had answers, because Isabella Royce had vanished. She wasn't at her estate, nor on social media, nor spotted by paparazzi. She was a ghost, and the silence around her grew like gravity. At the Royce estate, the morning began differently. Henry stood at the breakfast table, not reading the paper, scanning it. Each headline was another chess move. The media had taken the bait exactly as he'd intended. The first step in any destruction was misdirection. Let them think the story was about a humiliated girl. Soon, they'd realize it was about who humiliated her. His phone buzzed once. A message. Phase 2 confirmed. The funding pull begins at noon. He smiled faintly. Phase 2 meant that Marston's foundation, the glamorous nonprofit behind the Gala, would start losing financial oxygen. One by one, its lifelines would vanish, all without Henry's name appearing anywhere near it. He turned to his daughter, who stood by the window, still wrapped in mourning quiet. "They're talking about you," he said. "I know." "Do you regret it?" "No," she whispered. "But I don't understand your endgame." Henry walked closer, his reflection merging with hers on the glass. "Endgames are for players, Bella. I write the rules." By midday, Evelyn Marston's office looked like a bunker under siege. Phones rang without pause. Publicists shouted over one another. Screens flashed with collapsing stock graphs. Even her PR consultant, a man who normally thrived in chaos, had gone pale. "We need a statement, Evelyn," he urged. "You have to say something." "What do I even say?" she snapped. "Apologize. Say the guards acted independently. Say you're horrified." "And what happens when someone asks how they got hired?" The consultant hesitated. He knew what she meant. The security firm Titan Guard International. The same firm that trained half the elite event staff in the city. And now, quietly, every Titan Guard contract was being suspended. A secretary rushed in, panic thin in her voice. "Ma'am, the donors' accounts. The pledges are gone. Every single one. Frozen or withdrawn." Evelyn felt the air leave her chest. She stared at the floor, her voice barely audible. "Who did this?" No one answered, but everyone in the room knew. Henry Royce didn't threaten, he erased it. Across the city, news anchors switched tones. The story was evolving. What had started as a viral embarrassment was mutating into a corporate mystery. Sources claim the Imperial Orchid Hotel faces sudden financial strain. Anonymous withdrawals totaling hundreds of millions. Could this be connected to the Isabella Royce incident? The narrative had shifted, and once the world starts asking why, silence becomes a roar. By nightfall, Evelyn Marston appeared before cameras in her penthouse, her voice trembling beneath carefully applied makeup. "What happened to Miss Royce was unacceptable," she began. I take full responsibility." But the words were hollow. The public could smell fear through the screen. The apology came too late, too rehearsed. The comments rolled in real time beneath the broadcast. Fake tears. Too little, too late. Where's the real apology? Someone even typed, "Let her father speak." They didn't know how close they were to the truth. In the Royce Mansion study, Henry watched the broadcast without sound. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. His satisfaction was too quiet for expression. "Do you think she means it?" Isabella asked. "Apologies," Henry said, "are only valuable when they cost something." He muted the screen, then opened a file on his tablet. A new plan. Phase 3. At the top of the document, 2 words glowed in white font. Public exposure. Outside, the world moved in slow shockwaves. the hotel's CEO resigned. The foundation's major sponsors temporarily suspended activities. Influencers who'd mocked Isabella deleted their videos. Some even posted long, trembling apologies of their own, hoping to survive whatever was coming. Through it all, Isabella remained silent. Not because her father told her to, but because she finally understood. Power didn't speak. Power waited. And in that waiting, something in her began to harden. Not bitterness, not vengeance, but awareness. She realized her father wasn't just protecting her. He was teaching her how to inherit him. That night, as the city's skyline blinked under restless clouds, the narrator's voice returned, calm, inevitable, like truth disguised as prophecy. Reputation is a mirror. Crack it, and everyone sees their own reflection in the shards. The world was about to learn that some mirrors cut deeper than glass. The storm outside mirrored the one inside her. Rain lashed against the Royce estate's glass walls, drumming like the pulse of an angry city. The morning news played softly in the background. Endless coverage, speculation, and hashtags. Isabella stood barefoot before the window, watching thunder crawl across the sky. Her name was everywhere now. Isabella Royce, the girl they humiliated. Some painted her as a victim. Others called her a mystery. But none of them truly knew who she was, and that anonymity had become her greatest weapon. In the adjoining room, Henry was on a secure call. His tone was calm but absolute, the voice of a man who moved worlds with a word. "Liquidate Marston's offshore accounts," he said. "Quietly. Divert the losses into foundation-linked charities. Let them bleed into their own philanthropy." He hung up and turned to find Isabella watching him. Her expression had changed, no longer wounded, no longer soft. "You're dismantling them," she said. "Correction," Henry replied. "I'm reminding them who built their podium." She stepped closer. "And after that?" "After that," he said, "we let them apologize. Not to you, to the world they deceived." She studied him, then looked away, her voice low. "You always fix things by breaking people." Henry tilted his head, not angry, but curious. "And you would prefer?" "To make them understand," she said. "Breaking them teaches fear. Understanding teaches memory." That made him pause, a flicker of admiration in his gaze. "You sound like your mother." It was the first time he'd mentioned her in years. Later that afternoon, Isabella left the estate alone. No bodyguards, no entourage, just her and the city. The press didn't expect her to appear, not after vanishing for days. But she didn't hide this time. She walked through downtown streets where her face glowed on every screen. People turned, whispered, snapped photos. Some offered sympathy. Others stared with the cruel fascination fame always brings. At a cafe, she sat by the window and watched the city move. Her phone vibrated with hundreds of messages, journalists begging for statements, PR firms offering to rebuild her brand. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened her notes app and began to write. Not a statement, a story. It began simply, "They told me I didn't belong. They were right, because belonging to them would have required forgetting who I am." She wrote for hours, her words raw but precise. She didn't name names. She didn't lash out. She painted the night of the gala as what it truly was, a mirror reflecting society's quiet cruelty. When she was done, she uploaded it. No press release, no signature, just one post. Within minutes, it went viral. The internet shifted. The narrative bent like light through glass. Her post wasn't angry. It was elegant, surgical. She wrote about body shaming, elitism, and the illusion of charity that masked humiliation. Every word carried grace and quiet fire. Celebrities reposted it. Activists quoted it. Morning shows read it aloud between ad breaks. Suddenly, Isabella Royce wasn't a meme. She was a movement. That night, Henry watched the coverage from his study. He saw her words on the news ticker. "We must stop disguising cruelty as class." For the first time in years, he smiled. Not the sharp smile of a strategist, but the rare, fleeting kind that revealed pride. His phone buzzed. Evelyn Marston's name flashed across the screen. "Henry," she said, voice trembling. "We need to talk." "Do you?" he replied. "You've made your point. The foundation's collapsing. Investors are gone. We can't operate." "That was inevitable," he said. "You built on shallow ground." "Please," she whispered. "The girl, your daughter, she's turned the world against us." He paused, letting the silence hum like a live wire. "No," he said finally. "She turned the world toward herself. There's a difference." And then, for the first time, he gave Evelyn the mercy she didn't deserve. "You will apologize again, not for the guards, for the system you represent. You will call the networks tomorrow. I've already arranged it." "You can't arrange my apology, Henry." "I just did," he said, and hung up. Isabella returned home late that night. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick and reflective, as if the streets themselves had been polished clean. Henry was waiting in the garden, coat collar turned up against the cold. "You wrote beautifully," he said. "You read it?" "The whole world did," he said. "You've done more in one paragraph than my lawyers could in a year." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time you let me lead the next move." He raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" "They'll apologize," she said. "But not because you made them, because I'll make them want to." Henry watched her, really watched her, and in that moment, something shifted between them. He saw not his daughter, but his successor. At dawn, news broke that Evelyn Marston had agreed to a live televised apology to Miss Royce and all victims of public humiliation. The networks called it historic. Behind the scenes, none of them knew the real story, that the press conference wasn't Evelyn's idea. It was Isabella's. She had made a single phone call to the media's most powerful anchor, offering an exclusive interview, not to defend herself, but to redefine the conversation. Her words spread like wildfire before she ever spoke them. Forgiveness is not weakness, but silence in the face of cruelty is. As she prepared for the interview, Isabella stood before her mirror. The same mirror that had reflected tears 3 nights ago now reflected resolve. She wore no jewels, no designer gown, just a tailored black dress and the white rose again, pinned over her heart. The world was about to meet her not as the girl turned away from a gala, but as the woman who turned the gala into a lesson. And far away, Henry watched the sunrise, whispering to himself, not out of control, but recognition. "She's no longer in my shadow," he said. "She is the light." The morning of the broadcast arrived with the kind of stillness that feels orchestrated, skies the color of iron, city streets half empty, and a quiet hum of anticipation that threaded through every living room and device screen. In the control room of Global View Studios, producers rushed between panels of flickering monitors. The studio lights were already hot, spilling white fire across the stage where the interview would happen. At the center of it all sat Isabella Royce, poised, calm, unreadable. No handlers, no PR agents, just her. The anchor leaned forward, microphone clipped to her lapel. "Miss Royce, thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," Isabella replied, her tone smooth as glass. Across the world, millions tuned in. In offices, coffee shops, airports, screens froze mid-scroll. The girl who'd been laughed out of a gala now commanded the collective gaze of a planet. The interview began softly. "You've been at the center of a global conversation this week. How are you holding up?" "I've had quieter weeks," Isabella said, a small smile ghosting her lips. The audience chuckled. The moment disarmed the room. She was unshaken, elegant. Her pain transformed into poise. "Can you tell us, in your own words, what happened that night?" She exhaled, her voice steady. "I went to a charity event I believed was about inclusion. What I found was exclusion disguised as elegance. They didn't just turn me away. They reminded every woman watching that value still depends on appearance." The words landed like stones in still water. "But," she continued, "I'm not angry. Because what they did to me publicly only revealed what many experienced privately." The studio fell silent. Even the anchor, usually polished and detached, looked moved. Back at the Royce estate, Henry watched on 3 screens simultaneously. He'd seen powerful people speak before: presidents, CEOs, generals. But Isabella's calm command was something else. She wasn't appealing for sympathy. She was leading a reckoning. "She's extraordinary," murmured his assistant. Henry didn't respond. But behind his composed expression, something stirred. Pride, yes, but also unease. Power in its purest form was unpredictable. Even his. At the studio, the anchor hesitated before the next question. "Miss Royce, it's been reported that the foundation responsible for that gala is facing financial strain, and that your father, Henry Royce, might have ties to what's happening behind the scenes. Is that true?" The question dropped like a flare, all eyes on Isabella. She smiled faintly. "My father taught me that silence can be stronger than violence," she said, "but I also believe silence has to serve truth, not ego." A pause. "I don't control my father's decisions," she continued, "but I understand them. What he did was protection. What I'm doing now is transformation." The anchor blinked, slightly thrown by the elegance of her deflection. "Transformation in what sense?" "This isn't just about me," Isabella said. "It's about a world where kindness should never need credentials, where a dress size doesn't dictate respect, where apologies mean more than press releases." The audience applauded. Online, the reaction was instantaneous. Isabella speaks. Royce Redemption. The Lavender Revolt. Millions of viewers flooded the stream with praise, admiration, and outrage. Influencers called her a modern icon. Feminists hailed her as the voice of accountability. Even critics who mocked her days ago deleted posts and replaced them with solidarity. But not everyone was cheering. In a penthouse downtown, Evelyn Marston watched the interview through trembling hands. Every sentence felt like another nail in her career's coffin. Her advisors hovered nearby, whispering about lawsuits, sponsors, and crisis management, but she barely heard them. "She's turning me into a villain," Evelyn whispered. "You made yourself one," her assistant said quietly. For the first time, Evelyn realized she wasn't battling a man like Henry Royce. She was battling his legacy. Halfway through the broadcast, the anchor turned solemn. "One final question, Miss Royce. What would justice look like to you?" The studio held its breath. Isabella's eyes lowered for a moment. Not dramatic, just reflective. When she looked up, her voice carried the weight of stillness. "Justice isn't money, it's a memory, but accountability must have value." She paused, then added, "They tried to make me small. I'll make sure every woman watching knows she's not." Applause erupted. Cameras zoomed in. The white rose on her dress caught the light like a flare. The narrator's voice, slow, deliberate, cut through the applause. And with that, she stopped being a story. She became a symbol. Symbols do not end. They echo. Back at the Royce estate, the phone rang again. Henry ignored it at first, until he saw the caller ID. "Evelyn Marston, live conference line." He answered. "Henry," she said, her voice breaking. "We can't contain it. The board's resigning. The hotel's shares have plummeted 40% in an hour." "That's not my concern," he said. "It will be," she snapped. "If this continues, regulators will come after us. After you. They'll dig into every partnership, every shell firm, every offshore account. You're not immune. Henry froze for the first time. Evelyn wasn't wrong. The more public the scandal became, the harder it was to stay invisible. You think you can control her? Evelyn hissed. But she's already outgrown you. She hung up. That night, as social media burned with praise and protest, Isabella sat alone in her dressing room, staring at her reflection. The applause still echoed faintly in her ears. She should have felt victorious. But something inside her twisted, a realization that her voice now carried expectations. The world wasn't listening to a woman anymore. It was listening to a movement, and movements can devour their makers. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her father. "Come home, we need to talk, tonight." She looked at the screen for a long moment, then typed back only one word. Soon. Outside, lightning lit the horizon, the kind that doesn't strike yet, only warns. The omniscient voice returned. Power, once awakened, cannot return to sleep. It spreads, beautiful, dangerous, unstoppable. And those who try to guide it often forget. Fire does not follow the hand that lit it. The world did not sleep that night. By dawn, every major news network replayed Isabella's interview in fragments, her voice dissected, slowed, replayed over dramatic music. "They tried to make me small. I'll make sure every woman watching knows she's not." That single line became a headline, a hashtag, and a manifesto. Billboards across cities glowed with her image. Protesters gathered outside the Velvet Foundation headquarters, banners raised, chanting, "Apologize, compensate, change." It wasn't just about a gala anymore. It had become about everyone who had ever been shamed, silenced, or unseen. At Royce Industries Tower, the mood was nuclear. Henry Royce's private office was lined with screens, each one streaming chaos. Stock tickers bleeding red, reporters swarming, hashtags pulsing in real time. His chief of communications, Marcus Lang, stood pale-faced by the window. "It's spreading faster than we can manage, sir. Even our subsidiaries are trending." Henry didn't look away from the main screen, a live feed of protesters outside the Velvet Foundation. "Let it burn," he murmured. "Sir? Every empire needs a storm. This one came on schedule." Marcus hesitated. "But the regulators are calling. They're linking your offshore accounts to the Foundation's parent company." Henry turned slowly. "Then they'll learn what I want them to learn." Across the city, Evelyn Marston sat in a boardroom under siege. The Foundation's board members were arguing, sweating, shouting, chaos in expensive suits. Screens on the walls showed live commentary, pundits calling for resignations, politicians demanding accountability. "We issue a statement," one board member insisted. "We offer her money, make it go away." "$5 million, another suggested. Evelyn slammed her palm on the table. $5 million? She doesn't need your pocket change. She has Royce blood in her veins. The room fell silent. For the first time, Evelyn said what the world hadn't yet confirmed, the whispered rumor now spoken aloud. Her father is Henry Royce. By noon, that revelation was everywhere. Breaking. Billionaire Henry Royce confirmed as father of Isabella Royce. Mystery heiress's speech shakes global elite. The Lavender Revolt. How one woman took down a foundation. Talk shows debated her every word. Some called her brave. Others called her privileged. But the movement had outgrown opinion. It had become inevitable. In her apartment, Isabella watched it all unfold. The noise, the frenzy, the wars in her name. She sat cross-legged on the floor, a cup of untouched tea beside her. Maya, her childhood friend, sat opposite her, scrolling through her phone. "You broke the internet," Maya said softly. "They're calling you a goddess, a fraud, a savior. Everything at once." "I didn't mean this," Isabella murmured. "You meant for truth, Maya replied. It just came with fire. Isabella looked toward the window. The city below was alive. Protest signs, drone cameras, flashing lights. It feels like I started something I can't finish. Then don't finish it, Maya said. Redefine it. Meanwhile, at Global View Studios, a meeting of network executives was in full swing. Ratings are astronomical, said the director. But we're also receiving death threats from both sides. Feminist groups want us to host her again. The foundation's lawyers are preparing a defamation suit. Good, said the network head, smiling thinly. Controversy is currency. At the same time, Henry Royce met privately with two government officials at a secluded estate. Documents lay across the table, property seizures, subpoenas, frozen accounts. Henry, one official warned, if you're tied to the foundation's collapse, this won't be containable. Containment is for the weak, Henry replied. You can't kill a story. You can only redirect it. And where exactly are you redirecting this? He looked toward the window, where a live feed of Isabella's face glowed on a distant billboard. To its rightful conclusion, he said, public repentance, followed by public reward. The omniscient voice returns, cool, godlike. Power does not fear chaos. It manufactures it, molds it until the world begs for order again. And the one who restores that order becomes not villain, not savior, but necessity. By nightfall, the movement had a name. The Lavender Revolt filled every corner of the digital world. Marches erupted in cities. Corporate sponsors withdrew from the foundation. Evelyn's resignation leaked before she could even sign it. And in the middle of it all, Isabella received an invitation, a televised summit organized by the Global Ethics Council, demanding that the Velvet Foundation publicly apologize. The event would be global, live, unedited. Every camera in the world would be watching. At the Royce estate, Henry stood before the massive windows overlooking the city's lights. Isabella's face flickered across the skyline on dozens of screens, the symbol he had unleashed, now larger than himself. She's forcing the world to bend, Marcus said behind him. What if it bends too far? Henry didn't answer. He merely whispered to himself, then we make it pay for the privilege. Meanwhile, Isabella scrolled through endless messages. Support, threats, confessions. The world wanted something from her. Every world changer learns that too late. A message pinged at the top of her feed. From the Global Ethics Council subject, formal apology broadcast. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. She stared at it for a long time, then whispered to herself, tomorrow, we will finish this. The omniscient voice closes the act. The storm she summoned had turned into a hurricane, and yet, every hurricane has an eye, a brief stillness before destruction decides which way to fall. The day of the public apology arrived like a court summons for the entire world. Billboards flickered with countdown clocks. News anchors rehearsed their solemn tones. The Global Ethics Council promised unprecedented transparency, the kind of phrase that made ordinary people stop what they were doing and tune in. The broadcast would go live from the Meridian Conference Hall, an architectural marvel of glass and steel. Inside, the stage gleamed under brutal white light. 3 seats waited, one for Evelyn Marston, one for a representative of the Velvet Foundation, and one for Isabella Royce. Millions were already watching. Backstage, Isabella sat in silence. Her stylist fussed with her hair, but Isabella's gaze was far away, fixed on her reflection in the mirror. Do I look nervous? She asked. No, the stylist said. You look unshakable. She smiled faintly. Good, because I am. Across the hall, Evelyn Marston arrived, flanked by lawyers and PR handlers. Her face was drawn, the controlled composure of someone walking into an execution she could not postpone. She caught sight of Isabella through the glass partition. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second, recognition without forgiveness. The show director's voice blared through the intercom. We go live in 60 seconds. Mic check, final lights. Remember, no interruptions. This is streamed to every major network. In homes across the world, families leaned in closer to their screens. In offices, people stopped meetings. In Henry Royce's private study, the entire wall had become a monitor. A panoramic display of the event. Henry stood motionless, one hand resting on a crystal decanter. "The world thinks this is her victory," he murmured. "They'll learn soon enough. Victory is never free." The moderator stepped forward, voice crisp with practiced neutrality. "Good evening. Today's broadcast represents a historic act of accountability. The Velvet Foundation, whose recent gala drew widespread outrage, will issue a formal apology to Miss Isabella Royce, the woman at the center of this event." The camera panned to Isabella. She sat tall, her lavender dress understated, elegant. The symbol had returned, more powerful in simplicity than any crown. Evelyn, beside her, shifted nervously. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Miss Marston," said the moderator, "you have the floor." Evelyn stood. Papers trembled slightly in her hands. "On behalf of the Velvet Foundation," she began, "I wish to extend a sincere and unconditional apology to Miss Royce for the treatment she received at our charity gala." A pause. Cameras zoomed in. "Our organization failed in its duty to uphold dignity and equality. What occurred was unacceptable and does not reflect our values." She looked down at her notes, then up again. "Furthermore, we acknowledge that no public gesture can undo public humiliation. Therefore, the Foundation's board has approved a financial settlement of—" The moderator interrupted. "Miss Marston, please specify the amount for the record." Evelyn hesitated, her throat tight. $5 billion. The audience gasped. The sound rippled through the hall like a shockwave. The camera cut to Isabella, calm, eyes unreadable. Marcus Lang turned to Henry, startled. "You made them pay $5 billion? That's—" "Not payment," Henry interrupted. "It's punctuation." Marcus frowned. "Sir, what are you doing?" "Finishing the story," Henry said quietly. "The world wants a clean ending. Let's give them one." Back on stage, Evelyn's voice faltered. "This settlement is to compensate Miss Royce for the emotional and reputational harm caused by our organization's conduct." Her lawyer leaned forward, whispering urgently, but Evelyn shook her head and continued. "But this isn't just about money," she said suddenly, voice cracking. "It's about what power does when it believes it won't be challenged." The moderator blinked. This wasn't in the prepared script. "Miss Marston, I need to say this," Evelyn pressed. "I was told to humiliate her, to make an example, to remind the world that wealth doesn't equal belonging." Gasps filled the room. Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but revelation. "Told by whom?" the moderator demanded. Evelyn hesitated, her lips parted. "By the same man funding this settlement," she whispered. "Henry Royce." The broadcast exploded into chaos. Cameras zoomed, producers shouted through earpieces, security guards rushed toward the stage. In the Royce estate, Henry's expression didn't change. Only the faintest smile curved his lips. "Ah," he said softly. The script breaks itself. Back at the hall, Isabella rose slowly from her seat. The lights seemed to dim, though no one had touched them. "You're saying my father orchestrated this?" she asked, voice low but resonant. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "He said humiliation sells faster than heroism. He said the world needed a face to pity, so he could buy their redemption afterward." The crowd erupted, reporters shouting questions, flashbulbs strobing like lightning. Isabella stood perfectly still in the storm. "Then today," she said, "we end not just the lie, but the puppeteer." She turned to the cameras. "You wanted the truth? Here it is. Every empire built on humiliation will fall by exposure." Her voice grew stronger, steadier. And every daughter used as a pawn will one day rewrite the game. Applause erupted, raw, thunderous, uncontrollable. Henry poured himself a drink. Marcus stared in disbelief. "She's destroying your life on air," Marcus said. "No," Henry replied, swirling the glass. "She's freeing me. The myth of control was always the prison." Marcus looked at him like he was mad. "Then what now?" "Now?" Henry said, raising the glass to the screen. "Now she has become a legend, and legends make better shields than kings." Back at the conference, the moderator struggled to restore order. "Ladies and gentlemen, we need to conclude this session." But Isabella wasn't done. She stepped forward, facing the camera directly. "You can't apologize your way out of cruelty," she said. "You can only dismantle it." Her gaze was unwavering, voice like fire wrapped in silk. "So let this be the final act, not of shame, but of awakening. I accept the apology, not as closure, but as evidence that the world is watching." She turned, looked at Evelyn. Not with hatred, but with a sorrow that felt deeper. "You were a weapon," she said softly. "Now you can be a witness." Evelyn broke down, sobbing as the cameras flashed. The omniscient narrator returned, voice low and prophetic. And so the apology became a reckoning. The sinner confessed, the puppet severed its strings, and the daughter became the architect of her father's undoing. History does not remember who started the fire, only who stood in its light. The world awoke to an empire in ruins. Every news station, every feed, every trending tag screamed the same name: Henry Royce. The man who had built silence into an empire was now being dissected in real time. Investigative reports exposed shell corporations, offshore accounts, and political bribery. His face, once invisible, known only in whispers, now dominated headlines like a fallen deity. The billionaire behind the scandal, the father who funded humiliation. Royce's empire implodes. At the Royce estate, the silence was unbearable. The mansion, usually humming with staff, advisors, and quiet orchestration, now echoed with emptiness. Half the household had quit overnight. Papers littered the marble floor, the debris of a dynasty unraveling. Henry stood at the center of it all, dressed in black, his composure still intact. Only his eyes betrayed exhaustion, not of defeat, but of revelation. Marcus Lang burst through the door holding a tablet. "It's over, Henry," he said breathlessly. The council froze every account. The SEC just announced an official investigation. "You're a symbol," Henry interrupted quietly. Marcus frowned. "A criminal." Henry smiled faintly. "The difference depends on who writes the ending." She hadn't slept. Her phone vibrated endlessly, messages from strangers, allies, brands begging her to partner, networks offering her her own show. She ignored them all. Her laptop played the news. Henry Royce, exposed. His empire collapsed under scrutiny. His fortune was frozen. The host's voice echoed through the room. "The man behind the Gala scandal faces potential criminal charges. Insiders suggest even his daughter Isabella Royce may be called to testify." Maya looked up from her phone. "Are you hearing this?" "I am," Isabella said softly. "You don't look surprised." "Because I'm not." She shut the laptop. "He planned this. He always plans everything." "You think he wanted to be destroyed?" Maya asked, incredulous. "Not destroyed," Isabella murmured. "Immortalized." Producers scrambled to assemble a follow-up segment. The footage of Isabella's confrontation with Evelyn had shattered every previous broadcast record. Sponsors were fighting to buy airtime. One junior producer leaned over to the director. "Should we reach out to Henry Royce for a counter-interview?" The director laughed. "He won't talk." But he was wrong. Henry Royce sat in front of a single camera. No lighting crew, no studio audience, just him and his words. He looked straight into the lens, his expression calm, almost fatherly. "My name is Henry Royce," he began. "For years I believed power was protection, that control could create order." A pause. "But control is another form of fear. I thought I could shield my daughter from a world that worships image by reminding her how fragile that worship is." He leaned forward. "What happened at the gala was wrong. It was cruel. But cruelty has always been currency. We only notice when the bill comes due." He exhaled, steady. "I will accept every consequence, every fine, every judgment, every exile. Because the only inheritance worth leaving my daughter is the truth of consequence." He looked down, then up again. "If you must remember me, remember this. Empires rot from within, but sometimes they must fall so something cleaner can grow." The recording cut abruptly. "We've just received a statement from Henry Royce, a recorded message apparently released by his estate hours before his disappearance. Authorities confirm he left the country early this morning via private jet. Destination unknown." The anchor's voice faltered. "Some sources believe the billionaire intends to surrender to international courts. Others suggest he has no intention of returning." Isabella stared at the television, frozen. The message replayed, her father's voice, calm, almost loving. Each word felt like both apology and legacy. "He's gone," Maya whispered. Isabella nodded, slowly. "No, he's everywhere now." She turned off the TV. The room plunged into silence. Meanwhile, the Velvet Foundation was being dismantled publicly. Executives arrested. Donors interrogated. The public apology had become a contagion. Every elite institution now faced scrutiny. Every act of discrimination dragged into daylight. The Lavender Revolt wasn't a protest anymore. It was a reformation. In the chaos, Isabella received an invitation. Location: the United Nations Media Chamber. Event: the future of accountability, a global conversation. Role: keynote speaker. Maya read it aloud. "Looks like the world wants its voice back." Isabella smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure it listens this time." Henry Royce, now unshaven and anonymous, stood at a window overlooking the Mediterranean. No assistance, no empire, just silence. The kind he once controlled, now earned. He turned on a small monitor. Isabella's face appeared, her speech preview circulating online. She looked radiant, determined. "You always were the better architect," he whispered. Cameras flashed as Isabella took the podium. Thousands watched in person, millions more online. She began softly. "A year ago, I was told I didn't belong in a room. Today, the world made sure that room doesn't exist anymore." Applause thundered. "But let's not mistake noise for progress. Real change isn't a headline. It's a habit. It's the quiet decision to treat others with dignity when no one's watching." The camera zoomed in as her voice steadied, powerful. "I'm not here to collect revenge. I'm here to close a circle so that no one else has to start one like mine." The omniscient voice returned. Calm, reflective, timeless. Empires fall not when they are hated, but when they are understood. And understanding, once achieved, cannot be undone. The daughter had become the conscience, the father, the ghost, and the world, their stage, learned at last that spectacle without empathy is hollow. As Isabella finished her speech, cameras captured the crowd rising to their feet, world leaders, activists, ordinary people standing together. In a quiet cafe somewhere across the sea, Henry watched on a small screen. He smiled faintly, eyes glistening, and whispered to no one. Now the story belongs to her. He turned off the monitor and disappeared into the night. The world paused again, not for scandal this time, but for something quieter, rarer: atonement. A full year had passed since the night of the gala. What began as humiliation had evolved into history. Laws had changed, companies rebranded, and across the world, the words, "The Lavender Accord," were printed on banners, textbooks, and corporate ethics policies alike. The day of the formal global apology had come, the moment the world would close its longest-running wound. The stage was cathedral-like, circular, open, bordered by light. At the center stood Isabella Royce, no longer the woman the world pitied, but the woman it now revered. Calm, poised, wearing a simple white suit that reflected every flash of the cameras. Behind her, a vast digital backdrop displayed the words, "Global Public Apology, Velvet Foundation Partners." Representatives from the foundation, corporate sponsors, and political figures filled the seats behind her, faces pale, composed, rehearsed. Evelyn Marston sat among them, quieter now, changed by her public ruin and slow rebuilding. The host stepped forward, voice solemn. Today, humanity witnesses a precedent. The organizations responsible for the discriminatory incident involving Miss Isabella Royce will issue a unified apology and confirm full restitution, valued at $5 billion. A murmur rippled through the hall. The number had become both a symbol and a sentence. The camera turned to Isabella. She didn't flinch. She had seen numbers before, her father's kind of numbers, cold and meaningless. But this, she knew, wasn't about wealth. It was about weight, the weight of accountability. She stepped to the microphone. "A year ago," she began, "I stood outside a building I was told I didn't belong in. I was judged, not for who I was, but for what I wasn't." A pause. The room hung on every syllable. "I could have stayed silent, but silence is the luxury of those unscarred by it." She looked out over the crowd, reporters, activists, citizens, former enemies. What happened to me happened to millions in smaller ways, at workplaces, schools, dinner tables. Cruelty in formal wear is still cruelty. Soft laughter from the audience, then stillness. But today, something changed. Not because of me, but because of what we chose to see together. She gestured to Evelyn, who slowly stood, trembling slightly. Evelyn's voice cracked as she spoke. "On behalf of the Velvet Foundation and its affiliates, we acknowledge our wrongdoing and issue a complete and unconditional apology to Miss Royce and to all those who have ever faced judgment for their bodies, their origins, or their differences." Her eyes glistened. "This moment does not erase what we did, but we hope it begins to rewrite what comes next." She bowed her head. The audience rose to its feet in applause. Journalists stood stunned as the apology streamed live. A veteran anchor whispered, almost reverently, "We've never seen anything like this. It's not just a story anymore, it's repentance." Screens displayed breaking news. $5 billion compensation transfer confirmed. Henry Royce's final directive honored by foundation trustees. Executives stared in disbelief. The funds had come not from the ruined foundation, but from a private offshore trust. One last unseen hand from Henry Royce himself. He had made sure the redemption was paid for, with his empire's ashes. After the ceremony, Isabella sat alone, makeup removed, the weight of the moment settling like dust after a storm. Maya entered, holding her phone. "You're trending again, but this time it's different." "Different how?" Isabella asked softly. "No hashtags, just one word. Grace." Isabella smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "Then maybe it's finally over." "No," Maya said gently. "It's just beginning. You turned pain into policy." A small cottage overlooked the water. Inside, a familiar figure, older, bearded, sat at a table, flipping through a newspaper with trembling fingers. Henry Royce. The headline read, "Isabella, Royce accepts global apology. Father's legacy restored in reform." He set the paper down, a faint smile ghosting across his weathered face. A small radio played her voice from the ceremony. "No empire deserves forgiveness, but people do. My father taught me that control is a myth, but choice is not. Today, we choose humanity. Henry closed his eyes, letting the words wash over him. For the first time, he looked peaceful. You learned it all, he whispered, and improved it. Outside, the waves crashed softly against the rocks, the same rhythm as applause. Later that evening, the lights dimmed as Isabella was handed a single envelope. No sender, no return address. Inside, a simple handwritten note. You rewrote the ending. Proud of you. H.R. No signature, no location, just the initials of a ghost who had built the storm that made her shine. She folded the letter carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Thank you, she whispered. In the end, it was not the humiliation that defined her, nor the money, nor the fame, nor the father's shadow. It was the moment she chose grace over vengeance, and turned spectacle into story, story into symbol, symbol into change. Empires fall, movements fade, but kindness, once televised, does not die. It multiplies. A girl in Mumbai watching Isabella's speech and applying to college she once thought she couldn't afford. A CEO in New York rewriting her company's dress code. A young man in Lagos standing up to a superior for mocking a coworker. Evelyn Marston volunteering at a women's shelter, quietly rebuilding her life. Maya opening a foundation with Isabella's name on the plaque. The Royce Initiative, for dignity in every form. Isabella stood on her apartment balcony as the first light rose. The city below pulsed with energy, no longer chaos, but renewal. Maya joined her with 2 cups of coffee. So, she asked, what's next? Isabella smiled, watching the sun crest the horizon. Whatever makes the world feel less small. They clinked cups. The light washed over her face, calm and fearless. Once, a woman was shamed for how she looked at a party meant to celebrate beauty. A year later, the world apologized. Not to her, but to itself. And somewhere beyond applause and outrage, between love and loss, a father and daughter finally understood each other. Through the language of redemption. The camera pulled back, the balcony shrinking, the city sprawling beneath her, until the skyline became a mosaic of light. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.